Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to the Harpin on Rugby preview show. Joining me to look ahead to Friday's quarterfinal is someone earning cap number 52. Welcome back to Mr. Neil Keego. Keegan.
How are we? I hope you're well. And just to make everyone feel easy, I'm not making a hostage video here. I know it does look like it again, but I promise I'm not.
You see, that's what makes you think even more that it is. But we'll take your word for it for now, because we'll press on with things. Now, before we get to the match, want to quickly just get your thoughts on the last game. We haven't spoken to you since that preview. What did you make of the match and all this talk that it's maybe down to demographics or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know. The game itself, I was there. Obviously, a tough day to play rugby. Like demographics, you mean like the age profile? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, the Ulster coach Dan McFarlane said afterwards that that they just simply can't compete with Leinster because of I'm actually glad this word is out there now, because there's a lot of different people. Some people talk about private schools. Some people talk about straight favoritism from the RFU. Some people talk about the population size. That's kind of the safe kind of thing. But it's all been lumped into this one word now. We've got demographics. So
yeah, it's like you say, you can't put this big problem into one word. I think Keith Wood was on Off the Ball during the week talking about it, and how people are envious of the Leinster system, and people say, well, why don't they just grab that template and throw it somewhere else? It's like, well, the Munster issue needs a Munster problem. The Ulster issue needs an Ulster problem. There's obviously talented players there. The depth is different based on population. That's understandable. But I also think part of the problem with Ulster is they're signing, for example, I can't remember the South African number 8, kind of on the older guy.
I would say, Vermeulen.
Yeah. Like, okay, 5 years ago, that's a magic signing. Now it's a retirement fund for him. With all due respect to him, it's not the best signing. And you look at what Munster have done over the last while too, in terms of signings. That's not a demographic. That's a bad business. But the skill level needs to be still there. The depth is the issue, not demographics.
Yeah, I agree. And they put this to Stuart Lancaster, because of course they did. And he talked about was, he said, well, I think it's more about the coaching, which of course he would say that because he's a coach, and that's what that's all he focuses on. He doesn't care where these players come from. He doesn't care where they went to school. He doesn't care. He wants to see he sees the players in front of him, and he picks the ones that he wants to get the job done. I think that's what Andy Farrell does. And I think that tends to be we have a lot of English coaches in the system now, and that's their right. They've got no Irish bubble issues in their head. They just want to pick a rugby team, and these are the players at their disposal. And yeah, go on.
I was just going to say as well, I think part of this is publicly the coaches need to have something to point at. They can't point at performance publicly. They do that behind closed doors, rightfully so. This isn't football. But they can't turn around and point fingers publicly at players. So they need something. So it's going to be demographics. It's going to be depth. It's going to be population. It's going to be money. At the end of the day, the money and the business end of things has been badly done in Munster. It's been better in Ulster a wee bit. They had the McElroy money years ago, but it's starting to get better. But at the end of the day, as King Stewart says, good coaching is good coaching. There's always going to be a depth issue population-wise. But when you look at what those two teams are doing, and you look at what Ulster did in the Aviva last week, you look at what Munster did in South Africa, that had nothing to do with anything other than skill level. The teams were picked, they were ready to go, and they just didn't perform. That's not demographics' fault. That's whether it's coaching confusing them or the players not performing. That's the issue. But they can't say that out loud, and nor should they, as long as they address it where they should address it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to talk about it, and we could go on for hours about it here. I just feel that it keeps coming up basically every time Leinster win, which that's the issue. Leinster have won, so therefore we have to look at all these reasons, and it kind of devalues the achievement in the moment. And I think, you know what I mean? I just want to, and like you say, there's a lot of issues going into it. And I just hope there's a balance when we discuss it in the future. Okay, listen, we'll move on now, and we'll start harping on this week's feature match, which, as you can see up there, is Leinster versus the Leicester Tigers in the quarterfinals of the 2022-23 Heineken Champions Cup. And it kicks off at the Aviva Stadium at 8 p.m. on Good Friday, April the 7th. Yeah, the match is being broadcast on RTE2 and BT Sport 1. And Leinster named their starting lineup on Thursday afternoon or Thursday lunchtime. So let's look starting with the back line. Fullback, we got Mr. Hugo Keenan. The wingers are James Lowe and Jimmy O'Brien. The centers are Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose. And the halfbacks are Jemison Gibson Park and Ross Byrne.
Delicious. But look, that's pretty close to our final team. That's it. I'm going to start saying it out loud. I know people didn't like me saying canned ham before the canned ham, but we've got to start being much like the big jersey. We've got to act like favourites without being disrespectful. Like that's an unbelievable backline. King Gary back in there. Hugo Keenan, unbelievably consistent. Jimmy O'Brien, well worth that jersey. And James Lowe on the other side. It's just brilliant. It was the guys were talking on the radio during the week when you look at Ulster and they play like I don't know. I don't remember saying to the missus who was there with me that Stockdale had the ball more than twice in the entire game because they play it like it's the year 2000. Whereas you look at what Lowe, you look at what Jimmy O'Brien are going to do against Leicester, they're going to be all over the place. And it's an extra threat everywhere. They can both kick, they can both catch. So it's a great start. And again with Gary back, Gary and the hench in the middle, perfect. I keep saying I'd pay twice, but I wouldn't.
Yeah, it's just interesting. It was I mean, you feel obviously Jordan Larmour's unlucky to lose out because but if you have Gary Ringrose available, especially when there's going to be 2 weeks off afterwards, you kind of have to play him. And Jimmy O'Brien did a great job at 13. It was his first time playing there this season, but now he's moved back out to the wing, and he would be kind of ahead of Larmour in the pecking order. That's the way it's fallen out. Larmour was injured for a while, and maybe slight dip in form, but he's coming back now. And just on him, there's 2 weeks against South African teams next week where he can run rings around them and give it an extra selection headache for the later stages if we get that far. So there's a lot of issues there, but like you say, that looks like it's close to the ultimate, the best team, best backline we can put out at the moment, and it's great to see. Okay, on to the forwards now. The front row is Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan, and Tyke Furlong. The second row, Ross Maloney and the skipper James Ryan, and the back row is now Ryan Baird, Caelan Doris, and Jack Conan. Yeah,
listen, obviously Josh being out is a difference, but look at that back row that's popped in. You know what I mean? You can't, with all due respect to World Player of the Year, he won't be missed this weekend, or tomorrow night as we record this. But again, if you look at that pack, you look at that top eight, and you were to pick one team out of the two sides, there's no Leicester players getting into that team. I think there's too much skill. There's so much gas in that team. Porter can play 180 minutes. Furlong is starting to come back. It's going to take a little bit of time, and that's fine. But delighted for Ross Maloney, second week in a row, second big game in a row, big faith shown in him. So yeah, again, like similar to that. Even with Josh fit, like Conan is on a run of form. There was something that came out on him during the week that he had a health issue for the last 18 months. He's starting to get to the end of that, and now we are starting to see Conan the Barbarian coming back. Caelan Doris, brilliant. Caelan Doris at 7 is going to be interesting. And then just Ryan Baird is an absolute freak. So these are players we need on the pitch. Whatever position we can get them in, we have to have them on the pitch. No one fancies a shot at that team.
Yeah, I mean, we were recording just less than a couple hours after the team was named, but I've seen comments around saying it looks like a great team, but we'd prefer if we had a more recognized open side in there, which is, it's true when you take not just any open side, but the World Player of the Year open side out of the team, it's going to leave a hole. So people say maybe Scott Penny, but when you have Caelan Doris back available to get some game time, you want to put him in, and there's plenty who can take that poaching role. Andrew Porter's no slouch to it himself. Ryan Baird can do it. Dan Sheehan. There's plenty of ways that those duties can be shared around the pack, but when you just think of the actual carrying power now that gives us with Ryan, Sheehan, Baird, Doris, Conan, all that, it was the pack, as we all know, that pretty much won us the game against Ulster. So it if anything, it beefs it up even more. So it's definitely a good combination,
Absolutely, and if you look at that, just with Josh missing, if you look at the line-out options in there, I'm just having a quick scan here, like. Nearly 5 of that 8 can be thrown up in the air at any point. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah, and we were doing some interesting variations against Ulster as well, just before that first try as well. So they've definitely got a lot to work with there, that's for sure. Okay, we'll move on to the bench now, and the front row is John McKee, Cian Healy, and Michael Alatoa. The second row is Jason Jenkins, and the back row is Scott Penny, and then the backs are Luke McGrath, Harry Byrne, and Kieran Frawley.
So, you know, we're talking about 23 and we're talking about Jordan Larmour. It's Frawley going in because he can play everywhere. That's the only thing. Larmour's on the way back. I've no doubt in that. He just had a double injury hit pretty close together, which kind of knocked the momentum off, but he was still rocking and rolling last week against Ulster. So there's no being dropped here, really. It's just utility. Frawley, much like Jimmy O'Brien, can do the job everywhere. John McKee again this week, which is great. Alatoa and Healy, obviously brilliant. And then Jenkins coming on. You know, if there is any, and I was asking about Maloney last week, and there was no issue, not found wanting at any point. And it's another big game for him, which means Jenkins may not get as many minutes as we expect, which will make him hungrier for the end of the season. Not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that they left Jenkins on the bench last week just showed the faith in Ross Maloney, because we knew that Ulster were going to come at us with this mauling game from the short lineouts. And Jenkins is statistically and physically our best guy for those situations. But it turns out they didn't need him. Ross Maloney's been played more than anyone else in this season for Leinster, and he's really earned that spot, and he's earned it for a second week in a row for sure. Okay, so now it's time to look at our opposition, which, as you can see, is the Leicester Tigers. And as ever, like my graphics department is putting the names there on the screen, so I won't read them all out. But if you're listening on the podcast, they can be found in the program notes. What do you make of it, Keego?
Yeah, I have an irrational dislike of Leicester, the place and the rugby team. But you know, again, as we say, long story short, if we're picking one team out of this, they might get a couple on the subs bench. Like the Gallagher Premiership is good to watch in context that it's the Gallagher Premiership. You know what I mean? Like there's very few teams in there that will challenge the top line. I know we talk about Saris and all that sort of stuff, but at the end of the day, real deal knockout rugby. It's about Leinster being professional, because Leicester are going to show up and they're going to try, but there's nothing in that. There's very little in that team that should worry us. You know, like they've got good backs, they've got all that sort of stuff, but you know they're going to try and go at it up front, and they're just going to be rolled over. They're still stuck in their old coach's ways. From the little bit I've watched now, I haven't watched a lot of them, but the little bit I've watched, they try and tuck it and go. And there's so much in that Leinster pack to stop them, to confuse them, to pass around them, to kick over them, that they just are going to get blown up by 50 minutes. And it's going to be a decent score. I don't think Leicester are going to be competitive once we get close to halftime.
It's similar to what we were talking about last week about Ulster needing a more than some of its parts kind of reaction to what happened earlier in the season. And you look at Leicester, the one thing if they might have going for them is that the club will still have the hurt of what happened. They did play us this time last year at the same stage of the competition. And so they do have that experience. They have that will to beat us. I've seen some of their fans, they were reacting to some of the articles coming out of the Irish media saying that how heavily favored Leinster are. So that's kind of getting them riled up and stuff. If they can get a good team performance, they do have some players. They've got a good open side themselves who go after ball. Rafael can get stuck in there and pinch a few. So if he gets a couple of early turnovers, you never know. You've got Freddie Stewart. He won't mind coming back and play. He'd be interested in playing a full 80 minutes of the Aviva, even if it's on the wing. But you got Michael Brown as well at fullback. He wouldn't mind to go off an Irish team as well. So there's a lot of inner motivation. And of course, coming off the bench, you got Dan Coe's like 163 years old at this stage, whatever he is. And of course, Jimmy Gopperth at 23, come a little cameo at the end. It'd be good to see him again. So if they can put together a strategy and play together, like it's just like we were saying about Ulster last week, they can definitely get something done. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, we saw last week what that hurt does. We saw last week what actually happens. Like there's emotion that goes in with what you're talking about, which is fair enough. And Ulster did give it a bash last week, and Leicester will give it a bash this week, all based off that emotion. Let's not let them do this to us again, but it will happen again. And when it starts happening again, much like last week, they will start to revert. They will start to remember the ghost of the 20 points up at halftime. That you can't get rid of that. If you don't have the skill to beat the team. It's not about emotion here. This is business now. This is real. And they will start getting strangled, and they will start getting memories of what happened, much like Ulster last week. And it takes a lot to get over that. And I don't think they have that right now, certainly.
Okay, and we'll move into the officials now. And the referee is that brilliant Georgian ref, but I'm not going to make a hames of his name. And he's got French officials backing him up there, but he is a good ref, and he tends to ref the situation rather than, he hopefully you say you don't want anyone to be called a homer ref when it's your team or not. He seems to kind of fit that mold so far. So we'll see how he gets on at the weekend. And the weather for Dublin on Friday evening, it's supposed to be dry, becoming cloudy, only 4% chance of rain. So a slight wind heading towards the south stand, but nothing too much. And that, of course, brings us to our predictions. We'll quickly go through these. We'll have a look at the 4 quarterfinals, starting with Toulouse against the Sharks.
Toulouse, obviously with my blue underwear on, I'd like the Sharks to do it, but I think I think is it home or where's that game on?
It's in France.
Oh, here. No, it's going to be Toulouse by quite a bit.
Yeah, these playoffs are sort of looking for Leinster anyway, but a bit of deja vu from last season if they go a certain way, because we got an Irish province in the last 16, Leicester in the quarterfinals. We could have Toulouse in the semis. We could have La Rochelle in the final. But the mix in that is the South Africans. They're kind of a wild card as compared to last year. So you don't know which team is going to show up for these games. They're playing their Springboks, but it definitely could go that way. All right. Okay, that leaves us with Exeter against Stormers.
Yeah, Stormers. I don't know, Exeter. I don't know what's happened. I used to love watching them. I used to love the vibe of the place. It's kind of fallen off the cliff since they were performing a couple of years ago. So yeah, Stormers again, and I think there's a score on them.
Okay, and that leaves La Rochelle against Saracens. They're playing on Sunday.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I thought La Rochelle got a bit of a fright last weekend, and I don't know if it was an off day or if that's the way it's going. So it'll be interesting to see. Saris are stubborn. They're annoying. We don't like them. They may do the job. I haven't even looked at where the game is. They may do the job, and it might be Saris. It'll be close. It'll be plus or minus 5 on either side.
Yeah, it's a home game for the French, for the champions, but
even still,
no, they did get a scare. No, I mean, Saris will say if Gloucester can push them, have a look at a way to rattle them, and I have a feeling maybe Leinster coaches might have had a look at that game plan as well to see what's going on there. Okay, and that just leaves our match at the Aviva. What do you say?
Yeah, it's us again. Like we're going to strangle another score out of them. It'll be similar to last week. You're looking at 15 points.
Okay. All right, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to Keego for joining me for another preview show.
Cheers. Stay safe. Enjoy the late night rugby. Behave yourselves.
And be sure to join the conversation on Mastodon throughout the match, and then maybe head over to our Facebook page at full time. And also don't forget to check out all Keego's stuff online. There's KeegoLaughs.com. The website's there and in the program notes. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend of rugby wherever you are, and stay safe, everyone. Slán.